The 24th of August 2024. It's the forenoon, early morning here in rural Ireland. So this is Trump throws EU, or Trump throws Europe under a bus. Trump throws Europe under a bus. Now, it's becoming very obvious from the meeting in Alaska between President Trump and President Putin that the two men admire each other. And there's no doubt Trump always liked a tough man like Putin. Now, I don't know, did you see the footage there? But after the first of all, Trump gave Putin a big flyover with big high-powered aircraft. We'll not bother showing that, you'll get it. But then Trump went on to lay wreaths at the graves of Russian soldiers who died not in action during the Second World War and are buried in Alaska. And it was a lovely bit of camera and media for Putin. So a few days later, the meeting was held in the White House, and it included a few EU leaders. But it didn't include Hungary, Poland, that are on the border there. It included Ursula von der Leyen. But maybe they all couldn't go. I wouldn't build too much into that. But I said that Trump didn't allow Ursula to stand in on the meeting on defence because she's not a head of state. She has no power herself. So anyway, that's just neither here nor there. So what appears to be happening is that Europe is becoming isolated. Europe 20 years ago was the up and up. It was the place to be. It was the garden in the middle of the jungle. And then it started all this green woke stuff, which is fundamentally destructive to any society. Started jailing people like me for just expressing themselves. It clamps down on any chemical or any product that it has the slightest doubt about, whether it's a soldering metal or something else. You can't get a lot of stuff. I notice it now, along the way I used to buy stuff, and now it's all banned. You can't get it in the EU countries. And so the industrial impact of this, taken with the carbon credit, has destroyed the EU economy. Now, African leaders were supplying Europe with a lot of its requirements. I made videos years ago explaining why you cannot bring processed coffee or cocoa into Europe. They won't let you bring it in, you see. And they were doing the same with Trump, with America. Now Trump has put the foot down and he's got a whole new deal. Now, implicit in the deal is a promise to buy 600 billion in US either treasuries or to invest in US companies. Now just think of that. The European Union has promised to invest $600 billion into US government or US banking or US investors, which could mean that the European Union will be giving seed capital to companies setting up a factory in, let's say, North Carolina to make Mercedes cars, Volkswagen cars, and under license or whatever. And Europe will have to finance that while its own industry is collapsing. That was some trashing to give them. Moreover, they have to promise to buy 750 billion in American fuel. I don't know will they, but that's the promise.
And both President Macron and then the...
They have to promise, I have a computer here, you see, so they have to promise to do that. Meanwhile, Trump is saying, we'll sell you all the weapons you want to give to Ukraine, but you have to pay for them. So it's becoming very, very obvious that Trump is a salesman. You pay, we'll give you what you want, but you pay. And in this way, and by doing this everywhere he can, money will come into the United States economy, and it could save the United States if there comes a severe recession. Now remember how banking works in the world nowadays. If a company goes into a bank and wants €1 billion to build a factory, the bank creates that money out of nothing. They just add it to their balance sheet. They give it to the company. The company pays back the money with interest, and the interest is kept by the bank. That's their only income. The other money is killed. So when that billion comes back in after 10 years, it's taken out of the money system. But in reality, inflation is when they don't take it out of the money system. Do you understand? That's sort of the way it is. Now, while Trump wants to settle the war in Ukraine any way he can, try and get it settled, and who's to blame him for that, the EU and Britain desperately do not want to settle the war. There are various reasons, and a lot of it is built into them. They hate the Russians with a vengeance. Another Christian country, remember. They hate them with a vengeance, and they do not want, they have this in their head, Russia cannot be allowed to win. Now, Russia only wants a bit of Ukraine, and they're keeping the Crimea. Ukraine could still be kept as a reasonable sized country, and but they can't have certain things. One of the things it cannot have is a military capacity that would threaten Russia. It cannot have NATO membership. Cannot have it. That's what they're laying down. They're fighting that. Now, there's not a hope of persuading Trump to do that. Trump has the whole power because Europe couldn't beat their way out of a paper bag. Now, this is Kaja Kallas, one from Estonia, I think. She hates Russia. Well, Russia did invade that country, but we're in different times. And here she is here talking how she's going to fight the Russians and she needs a bit of help from America. But America's not going to give her that help. Now, my camera is my camera going? It is. Okay, so now here we are.
I don't think it is wise to totally, shut into ourselves. We need the others. We need Turkey. We need US. We need also other partners, UK industries. So I don't think that flies. But strengthening the European industry is definitely one part of it. And now, I mean, it's always, chicken and egg issue. when we hear messages from America that, we don't really care about Europe, then of course it is also the feeling that, okay, but then why should we buy their weapons? I mean, let's have our own. So actually, you're going to lose jobs.
The idea.
No. You see what she says? If America doesn't care about European security, why should we buy their weapons? This is the same EU that has destroyed its own industry, that has driven out industry. In the UK, although it's not EU now, it's the same idea, and it was up to a few years ago. They have done everything to destroy the production of steel. The third steel plant closed in England and had to be rescued after it being driven out by the high energy costs, by this ridiculous idea that wind and solar farms can do some good. They don't do any good. They're actually consumers of electricity. And here's this one saying, oh, if America won't save us, why should we buy American arms? Well, the answer is that they have none of their own, and America hasn't too much either. So talk about an idiot. That's, by the way, Kaja Kallas, right? A while back, Kaja Kallas travelled to Washington asking to meet Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and she didn't get a forward appointment. She just rang up and said she was coming, and she arrived there and he had no plan to meet her, and he didn't meet her at all. So you see the shunning that took place between Marco Rubio, who's a very high up in the US government, and Kaja Kallas, and how cocky she was and how she got told, get down to the back of the stage. And these are the ones that are ruling us and treating us like imbeciles. In another interview, Trump said the EU was created to screw the United States. And they have massive tariffs. They had massive tariffs on EUs, on American stuff coming in. You see, you can't get American stuff at all. And it's not only tariffs. I think they don't really let you sell it. American companies are not on for selling into the EU. Maybe that'll change. Now, here's Trump just talking about the EU at some event he was at. Well, I just press this here. We're all right.
Countries of Europe. I love all countries, frankly, all different, but European Union's it was formed in order to screw the United States. I mean, look, let's be honest. The European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. That's the purpose of it. And they've done a good job of it, but now I'm president.
What will happen in these countries where the EU retaliate?
They can't. I mean, they can try.
Not that the EU is largely irrelevant, but it's...
So anyway, that's just taken up another clip there. So they're really, and then they have a due diligence. They have a due diligence directive that would force the like of America to state that it doesn't have slavery, that it has windmills, that it has carbon taxes. It's going to be very interesting to see will they ever enforce that. Now, the former British top army general, his name is, one from memory, it sounds like Nick Carney. It mightn't exactly be like that. It sounds like that anyway. But he's a top British fella. He suggests having a special bank that will pull the money out of people's savings secretly and put it in there. They had this before when they were reconstructing Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union. Now, just look at this Starmer fella beside us here in Britain, right?
That Ukraine will help shape, that's backed by strength, to stop Putin coming back for more. I'm working closely with other European leaders on this, and I'm clear that the UK is ready to put boots on the ground and planes in the air to support a deal, working together with our allies, because that is the only way that peace will last.
No.
Mr. President, in this new era, you're also right that Europe must step up. And let me tell you now, I see the growing threats we face, and so the UK is all in. This year we'll be giving more military aid to Ukraine than ever, and just this week I've set out how we're shouldering more of the security burden. We're already one of the biggest spenders in NATO, and now
the desire to spend more.
So they're the biggest spenders in NATO, and the people in Britain with nothing. No housing, no nothing. Where is the evidence that Putin or Russia is going to come in? Baloney. Russia is going to protect the eastern provinces and Crimea, where the Ukraine was torturing, killing and ruining the Russian population that lived there. It is the exact same, or was the exact same situation as pertained in Northern Ireland if in the Troubles the British government if the Irish government had to turn on the Unionist population and start killing them and taking away their schools and everything and making them talk Irish, the British government might have moved in and supported them. This is the same thing as is happening there. All that had to be done was respect everyone's right. And to this day, it's illegal to speak the Russian language in Ukraine. And here's this fella enforcing it from the United Kingdom. Another one is they're going to set up a mechanism where member states can invest their money into the EU Defence Fund. So Britain, France, we'll say member states, but Britain is a member state in that way. We'll say France can come along and invest billions of its euros into the EU Defence Fund. They're going to pull the money out for defence after them wrecking the industry that creates the wealth. Now, over in Hungary, Zelensky's government has cut off one of the oil supplies bringing oil into Hungary and Serbia. But there was another pipeline, and about a week ago, Zelensky bombed it and burst up the oil pipeline coming in through to Russia, into Hungary. I don't think it went through Ukraine at all. But he bombed the line, cutting off Hungary and cutting off Serbia from their oil supply. Right? Now, Hungary is complaining. And Hungary supplies a huge amount of the electricity for Kiev and several cities in western Ukraine. And now Viktor Orban is threatening to cut off the electricity from them. In other words, he's saying, you cut off our oil supply, most of the electricity is oil generated, coming in from Russia, while you buy Russian oil and you pay more to Russia for the oil than you do to than you do. In other words, the EU pays more to Russia for its oil than it pays to the Ukraine. Meanwhile, Orban makes the point, the oil was flowing into him and Serbia. Now they're blowing it up. Now they've cut off a lot of its energy supply, and that oil was being used to generate electricity, and he's now threatening to cut off the electricity to Ukraine. What's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. But the point is, folks, Austria and Ireland are not members of any alliance. How are they going to deal with us? Are we going to be forced to pay into them? Maybe they mightn't be able to force us. If they can't force us to pay into this defence fund, we will be a better off country, and so will Austria. But with the government we have, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael and Sinn Féin, all extreme lovers of the EU with Labour and people before puberty, they'll probably pay it in. So here we have a situation where the whole good of Europe, the bit it had left, the one thing we had was expertise. We could take resources. You look at all the mahogany comes in from Africa into the EU to be manufactured into furniture and everything else. Look at the uranium. Look at the tea and coffee. All raw goods coming from Africa. That may not be there anymore. As George Galloway rightly says, it has no resources of its own.